Please do make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. The moment his hand closed around my throat, I felt the air in the lab vanish. Beakers clinked, students froze, and the laughter that usually followed his bullying died instantly. His grip wasn't playful, it was dangerous, primal. He didn't know. None of them knew. Because to them, I was just Ms. Carter, the strict but quiet science teacher who never raised her voice louder than necessary. A woman who looked like she lived for textbooks and chalkboards. But beneath my modest blouses and quiet demeanor was a past that could break a man twice his size. And in that moment, as his thumb pressed against my windpipe, he woke something inside me I had sworn never to unleash in a classroom. The students thought they were about to see their teacher humiliated. What they didn't realize was this bully had just signed his own future's death warrant. I should have known trouble was brewing the moment Brandon King Walker walked into my classroom late, his chair scraping like nails against glass. He was 6'2", broad shoulders, and the kind of swagger that screamed untouchable. His reputation preceded him: football captain, rich father, and a mean streak that teachers either ignored or quietly endured. But me, I had survived far worse than high school bullies. Still, that morning, as I wrote formulas on the board, I felt his eyes burning into me. He whispered jokes, made his friends laugh, and waited for me to react. I didn't. Military training had taught me patience. The battlefield of a classroom wasn't much different from an actual one, except instead of bullets, there were whispers, rumors, and taunts. By the third period, the atmosphere was thick. My instincts screamed that something was about to snap. And it did. It happened in the lab. The smell of ethanol and copper sulfate still hung in the air when Brandon decided to show off. He towered over me, smirking as he shoved a beaker across the table, watching it crash to the ground. "Oops," he said, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "Guess I don't know my own strength." The class chuckled nervously. "Pick it up," I said calmly, locking eyes with him. My voice didn't waver. He sneered. "Make me." I stepped closer. I didn't blink. That's when his hand shot up faster than anyone could react, fingers wrapping tight around my throat, pushing me back against the edge of the lab table. Gasps filled the room. One girl screamed. Another shouted for him to stop. But me. My pulse slowed instead of racing. My training kicked in. Years of combat discipline, of silence and survival, whispered in my ear, "Stay calm. Assess. Neutralize." The students thought I was powerless. Brandon thought he was in control. They had no idea who I really was. And when I moved, his entire future shattered in less than 3 seconds. His grip tightened. I heard the metallic clink of a beaker tipping over beside me, the liquid sizzling as it met the burner's flame. Gasps turned to shrieks. Some students stood, unsure if they should run for help or film it on their phones. Brandon smirked, his face inches from mine. "What are you gonna do now, Miss Carter? Call the principal? Cry?" I didn't flinch. I'd seen men twice his size, high on adrenaline, screaming threats with real weapons in their hands. And I'd disarmed them before they even understood what had happened. Compared to that, Brandon was a child pretending to be a monster. My eyes narrowed, my voice low, steady as a sniper's breath. "You've made your last mistake." Before he could process it, I moved. My left hand snapped up, breaking his wrist hold with a twist he couldn't fight against. His body jolted forward. In the same fluid motion, I pivoted, using his own weight to send him crashing chest first into the lab table. Glass shattered under the impact. His scream cut through the stunned silence of the room. In exactly 3 seconds, The predator had become the prey. The classroom erupted. "Holy crap," someone shouted. "Did you see that?" another gasped. Brandon's friends stood frozen, mouths open, unsure if they should rush to him or step back from me. I leaned over him, my knee pressing against his back to keep him pinned. He struggled, but every move only drove him deeper into the hold. His breath came out ragged, panicked now. "Let me go," he choked. I bent close enough for only him to hear. "You just assaulted a teacher. That alone will end your future. But me, I don't need a principal. I've dealt with men who thought they were untouchable. They all bled the same." The fight drained out of him in an instant. His body went limp. Slowly, I released him, standing tall, my chest rising and falling with controlled breaths. The room had gone silent again. 30 pairs of wide, terrified eyes locked on me. To them, I wasn't just a teacher anymore. I was something else, something they couldn't define, but would never forget. Brandon stumbled to his feet, clutching his arm, his arrogance gone, replaced with confusion and fear. He looked at me like I was a stranger. And in that moment, I realized my carefully hidden past had just cracked wide open. By the time the final bell rang, the school was buzzing. News of what had happened in my lab spread faster than wildfire. Miss Carter flipped Brandon like a soldier. "She broke his arm, I swear." "No way, she's just a science teacher, there's no way she knows moves like that." Whispers trailed me through the corridors. Students parted when I walked by, their eyes darting between awe and fear. The timid woman they thought they knew, the one who scribbled formulas on the board and assigned pop quizzes, was gone. And Brandon, he hadn't spoken a word since. He left the lab clutching his wrist, red-faced and silent, humiliated in front of everyone. But humiliation was dangerous fuel. And boys like Brandon, entitled, reckless, with powerful families backing them, never let it go. The summons came before I could even leave the building. "Miss Carter," the secretary said nervously, poking her head into my room, "the principal would like to see you." "Now." I nodded, my stomach steady even as her eyes avoided mine. She already knew. Everyone did. Principal Harris sat stiffly behind his oak desk, hands folded like a judge waiting to deliver a sentence. Brandon was there too, slouched in a chair with an ice pack on his wrist. His smirk was back, though this time it looked brittle, forced. And beside him sat his father, Mr. Walker. The man radiated power in his tailored suit, silver watch gleaming as he leaned back with a self-satisfied grin. He didn't bother standing when I walked in. "Miss Carter," Principal Harris began, clearing his throat, "there's been a serious incident in your classroom today." I said nothing. My silence made Mr. Walker lean forward, his voice dripping with condescension. "My son tells me you assaulted him. Pinned him down. In front of witnesses. That kind of behavior is not only unacceptable, it's criminal." Brandon chuckled under his breath. I tilted my head, eyes sharp. "Is that so?" His father smirked. "You'll be out of this school by morning. And frankly, I'll make sure you never work again. Teachers like you need to learn their place." For a moment, the room went still. Then I leaned across the desk, meeting his gaze dead on. My voice was low, deliberate, each word laced with steel. "With all due respect, Mr. Walker, your son put his hands around my throat. That's attempted assault. I neutralized him. 3 seconds, minimal damage. If I'd wanted to, let's just say your son wouldn't be sitting here with just a sprained wrist." Brandon paled. His father's smug expression faltered, just slightly. Because in that moment, He saw it too, the way I didn't flinch, didn't back down, didn't blink. And then he asked the question I'd been dreading. "Just who are you, Ms. Carter?" I smiled faintly, though my pulse ticked like a time bomb in my chest. "Someone you don't want as an enemy." The silence that followed was louder than any scream that night. I sat alone at my kitchen table, the hum of the refrigerator filling the silence. A stack of ungraded lab reports sat untouched, papers blurring as my mind replayed the scene, Brandon's hand on my throat, his father's smug threat, and that one question echoing in my head. "Just who are you, Ms. Carter?" I'd built this quiet life on routine. Wake up, coffee, lesson plans, discipline, sleep. Repeat. No surprises. No shadows. I thought I'd buried that other life years ago, leaving it overseas with the dust, the heat, and the sound of boots hitting gravel at dawn. But today proved one truth I could never escape: the past doesn't stay buried. It waits. The flashback came uninvited, sharp as broken glass. "Carter, eyes up." The voice of Sergeant Dwyer roared across the training field. Sweat stung my eyes as I squared off against a recruit twice my size. His fists swung fast, wild. I let him come. One step, pivot, twist, his arm bent at the joint, his body slammed into the dirt. 3 seconds. Done. Dwyer's boots crunched beside me. He grinned, teeth flashing under the scorching sun. "That's it, Carter. No wasted movement. You don't fight fair. You survive. Remember that." And I had. I always did. The sound of my phone buzzing on the table dragged me back to the present. Unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. "Miss Carter." A low male voice, clipped, professional. "This is Detective Alvarez. We received a report from the Walkers tonight. They're pressing charges. Assault of a minor." I swallowed, my jaw tightening. "Your minor tried to strangle me in a classroom full of witnesses." The detective paused. "That's not what his statement says. And with his father's influence, well, let's just say this could get messy for you. Unless you want to come down to the station and make your own statement." I hung up before he finished. Because I knew this wasn't about justice. This was war. The next morning, when I stepped into the school building, I felt it instantly. The stares, the whispers sharper than before. Brandon swaggered down the hallway, wrist wrapped in a bandage like a badge of honor. His friends clapped him on the back, laughing. He caught my eye, smirk widening. He thought he'd already won. But Brandon didn't know who he was up against. The students didn't know. The principal didn't know. No one in this building knew the kind of wars I'd already fought or what I was capable of when pushed. And now, they were about to find out. The cafeteria was the last place I wanted to be. Too many eyes. Too many whispers. But teachers had to monitor lunch duty, and that day, my luck ran out. The moment I stepped inside, conversations dipped. Forks paused in midair. I heard the hiss of Brandon's voice before I saw him. "There she is, the psycho teacher." His laughter rang out, his friends roaring in agreement. I kept walking, tray in hand, ignoring him. Silence was always my weapon of choice. But bullies don't thrive on silence, they thrive on breaking it. Brandon shoved his chair back and strutted into the center of the room, blocking my path. His wrist was wrapped tight, but he raised his other hand like he was about to strike a pose for the cameras already out. "Hey, Miss Carter," he sneered, his voice booming. "Why don't you show us all how you tackle students? Come on, soldier. Hit me again." "Oh wait," he leaned in, his breath hot with arrogance. "You wouldn't, Unless we're in a war zone, right? The word hit me like a bullet. Soldier. The room erupted with murmurs. Soldier. What's he talking about? Wait, was she in the military? My heart pounded, but not from fear. It was the drumbeat of old instincts rising, a storm I had fought for years to cage. Brandon smirked wider, sensing victory. He reached for my tray, mocking, daring me, then deliberately dumped it to the floor. Food splattered across my shoes. Gasps echoed. Cameras flashed. Oops, he said, mocking the exact word he'd used before. Guess I don't know my own strength. Something inside me snapped. In less than a breath, my hand shot up, catching his arm mid-swing as he tried to shove me. I twisted, pivoted, and swept his legs out from under him. He hit the ground so hard the tables rattled. Students screamed. Some stood on their chairs to see. Phones were out everywhere now, filming. Before Brandon could scramble to his feet, I pinned him with a move no civilian should have known, my knee pressed to his chest, my forearm across his collarbone. His eyes widened, panic flooding in as he realized, this wasn't a teacher's reflex. This was combat. I leaned close, voice low, controlled, dangerous. You think this is a game, Brandon? You've never seen a real fight. But push me again, and you will. The room had gone deathly quiet. Every student, every teacher present, was frozen in shock. Brandon's bravado crumbled. His body went slack beneath mine, his mouth opening and closing with no sound. I stood slowly, releasing him, brushing cafeteria food from my shoes. My voice carried across the silence. Class dismissed. And I walked out, knowing the truth was out now. My cover as just Ms. Carter, the science teacher, was shattered. By nightfall, the whole town would know. By lunchtime the next day, my phone vibrated so much it buzzed across the countertop like an insect caught in a jar. Messages, unknown numbers, screenshots of the cafeteria video. Someone had uploaded footage within minutes of it happening. The angle wasn't perfect, but the move, the pin, the way Brandon's face drained of color, everything was there. I watched it once, twice, then stopped. Seeing myself through 100 strangers' lenses felt strange and distant, like watching a training recap from years ago. My hands didn't tremble. There was a sliver of professional pride, clean execution, minimal force, but pride had no place in the mess unfolding. Within hours, the video had spread from students' feeds to the town's gossip groups. Parents called the school hotline. Reporters started circling like vultures. The Walkers hired a lawyer. Someone had already filed a complaint with the state education board. The principal left me a curt voicemail. We need to talk urgent. Don't come in until we've spoken. HR is involved. HR. The two letters felt like a verdict. I braced for the calls, requests for statements, demands to resign, thinly veiled threats. They came in waves. An email from a parent with a subject line teacher with violent past. Another, is it safe to have our children around someone who can attack them? Someone posted an old, grainy picture of me in fatigues, no context, no dates, just a woman in uniform with a hard-set jaw. They knew nothing. They assumed everything. By late afternoon, the local news station released a piece. A parent in my town was interviewed, voice quavering. She's a monster. What if she had hurt him? What if she'd gone too far? The camera lingered on Brandon's wrist, the bandage like a badge of martyrdom. I answered 3 calls from a detective angrier than the officer who'd left the voicemail. The Walkers were pushing for charges. Their influence had turned a schoolyard incident into a criminal investigation before anyone could catch their breath. That night, my mailbox held a thin, official-looking envelope, no return address. My name typed in block letters. Inside, a photocopied excerpt from a public document, redacted in places, and beneath it, a single line typed in bold, "You can run, but you can't hide, Carter." My stomach dropped. The name Carter felt suddenly exposed the way a wound is when salt hits it. My past had never been public record, certain deployments, certain units, even my presence in some hotspots had been scrubbed for a reason. I had made that life disappear the way you bury glass, carefully, quietly, and with a prayer. Now someone had dug. The following week was a war of paper and voices. The Walkers' lawyer demanded suspension pending investigation. The PTO called for an emergency meeting. My colleagues were divided, quietly supportive in whispers, terrified in public. A few parents launched an online petition. Others rallied protectively on my behalf with posts about bullying and the right to safety. And the press. They smelled blood. A television van appeared at the school gates. Reporters asked questions that weren't about science or safety but about me. Where had I served? Why was I so proficient? I stayed measured. I posted a short statement on the school website. An incident occurred in my classroom. I acted to protect myself and my students. I will cooperate with any investigation. Cooperate. The word felt like a lie and a shield at once. Cooperate implied compliance. I would comply enough to keep the legal wolves at bay while withholding what needed to stay classified. But people wanted names, specifics. They wanted faces to blame. Someone in the comment section typed, "She's a veteran, can we trust vets around kids?" And another parent replied, "If she was in combat, she must be dangerous." The venom of ignorance was subtle and sharp. The school board called an emergency session. Parents crowded the bleachers that Thursday night. The gym smelled of coffee and fear. Cameras dotted the perimeter like predatory eyes. The Walkers arrived with the lawyer, Brandon's father spotless, smiling for the optics. Brandon himself wore a hoodie pulled low, eyes darting like a boy who'd seen a corner of his life crumble. When it was my turn to speak, the gym held its breath. Every face seemed to search for the truth about me, as though if my words lined up in a certain way, their fears could be soothed. I stepped to the podium and felt the old steadiness settle in, the one that had kept me alive on nights when mortars flashed on the horizon. I told the room the bare facts, what happened in the lab, why I moved the way I did, that my priority was the safety of the class. I did not elaborate. I would not give them the keys to a life that had been classified for a reason. Questions came fast and personal. Why didn't you call for help? Why such force? Do you train children for combat? The words stung less than I'd expected. I answered tightly, precisely, with no flourish, less like a teacher, more like a witness reciting events. When the father of one of my students accused me of endangering the school's reputation, I felt something quiet and dangerous stir. I met his eyes and, for the briefest moment, imagined how quickly a reputation could be reduced to ashes if someone wanted it to be. In the week that followed, life narrowed. Professional censure loomed. The state investigator requested my military records. I refused at first, knowing that releasing them would endanger not just me but others whose names were embedded in classified operations. The investigator pressed. The Walkers' influence pressed harder. The principal tried to mediate but admitted in private that the school board feared the legal costs of a lawsuit. And then the anonymous tip appeared in the local paper. Sources say Ms. Carter served in a classified unit overseas. Active duty records sealed. The article quoted unnamed officials and used language meant to inflame special operations, combat training, questionable tactics. That line, sealed records, did its job. In town, people read the phrase and connected dots that didn't exist. Fear loves a label. Late one rain-slicked evening, there was a soft knock at my door. The lamp on my hall table cast long shadows. I opened to find an envelope on the mat heavier than the last, its corners creased like someone had handled it with care. Inside, a single photograph, the image washed in grey. Me, years ago, hair cropped close, in fatigues with someone beside me whose face had been deliberately blurred. On the back, in an unfamiliar hand, "You left us. You left them to die." The accusation sat between us like a third presence. My chest tightened. The memories that had been a controlled tape in my head, orders followed, choices made, stuttered. I had left. For reasons that had saved lives. For reasons that had cost me sleep. For reasons I had tried to forget. Someone was trying to make the past a weapon against me. And they were close enough to send photographs to my house. As I stood there, the photograph in my trembling fingers, I realized the battle had widened. It was no longer just about a bully or a bruised ego. It was about who held the narrative and who could rewrite it into a sentence that would imprison me in public opinion and behind bars. Outside, the town lights smeared in the rain. Inside, a cold realization settled. Whatever had found me wouldn't stop until it had torn everything down. And somewhere, someone who knew the truth watched the flames start to lick at the paper, waiting to see whether I would burn with it or fight back. The board hearing was set for a Thursday night, the gymnasium transformed into a courtroom of whispers and judgment. Parents filled the bleachers, their murmurs buzzing like hornets in a hive. Teachers sat stiff-backed in the front rows, pretending neutrality while their eyes betrayed fear. Reporters clustered near the doors, cameras already glowing. Every second of my expression, every word that left my lips, would be cut, spliced, and fed to the public by morning. Principal Harris adjusted his glasses and leaned toward me. "You don't have to say much," he muttered, voice low enough for only me. "Keep it calm. The Walkers brought a lawyer. This is optics, not fairness." I nodded once. Calm, yes. But calm was a blade with two edges. The meeting began with Brandon's father standing tall in a navy suit, commanding the room with that polished confidence that only money breeds. "My son was assaulted," he boomed. "On school property. By an educator entrusted with his safety." A ripple of gasps. Brandon sat beside him with a sling now dramatic, unnecessary, but effective. His smirk was gone, his eyes slid nervously toward me as though some part of him still remembered what it felt like to have his chest pinned beneath my knee. Their lawyer followed, reciting phrases like reckless endangerment, excessive force, a danger to minors. Each word tightened the noose they wanted around my neck. Then it was my turn. I rose slowly, scanning the crowd. Mothers clutching their purses tighter. Fathers glaring with protective suspicion. Students craning from the back row, phones hidden in sleeves, hoping to capture a viral moment. I was attacked in my classroom, I began, voice steady, by a student who put his hand on my throat. I neutralized the threat with minimal force. Not one child was harmed. I regret nothing about keeping my class safe. A few scattered claps broke from the student section before teachers hissed them into silence. The chairwoman of the board cleared her throat. "And yet, Ms. Carter, there are questions about your background. The public deserves transparency. Were you, or were you not, involved in military combat?" The gym fell silent. The air itself seemed to hold its breath. I didn't answer. "Not yet." because the sound of boots on the gym floor echoed from the entrance. Every head turned. A man stepped forward, his posture erect, his face carved from old stone. He was older than me, hair grayed at the temples, eyes sharp with recognition the instant they found mine. He wore no uniform, just a plain jacket and jeans, but everything about him radiated soldier. The murmurs rose. "Who is that? Do you know him? Is he military?" He walked straight to the microphone as though it had been waiting for him. The chairwoman sputtered, "Sir, this is a closed." He raised a hand, calm but commanding. "My name is Major Daniel Rourke. I served with Ms. Carter overseas." His voice cut through the gym like a blade. "And if you believe for a second she's a threat to your children, then you have no idea the kind of threats she's already protected people from." The gym rippled with shock. Parents exchanged glances, reporters scribbled furiously, phones came out in waves. I felt heat crawl up my neck. Rourke. I hadn't seen him in over a decade. He was the last person I expected, or wanted, to walk into this. He wasn't finished. "You're trying to crucify a woman because she defended herself. But let me be very clear. I've seen her disarm men with bombs strapped to their chests. I've seen her shield civilians with nothing but her body. She's saved lives more than any of you could count. And now you're questioning whether she can handle a spoiled teenager." Gasps. Someone clapped. Then another. Half the students erupted into cheers until the chairwoman slammed her gavel, face red. But the tide had turned. And when Rourke turned his eyes back to me, for the first time in years, I felt the weight of my past settle on my shoulders. Because his presence meant only one thing. Someone had sent him. And whoever had dug up my past was closer than I'd feared. The board never reached a decision that night. They tabled the vote, further investigation needed, they said, but I could read the room. Rourke's testimony had cracked their certainty. Parents were divided, the press hungry, the students electric with rumor. But the real battle began the moment the gym doors closed. I felt it before I saw him. That old prickle at the back of my neck, instinct honed in deserts and alleys where silence meant death. When I stepped into the parking lot, Rourke was already leaning against my car. The sodium lights cast sharp shadows across his face, highlighting the scars time hadn't softened. "Still moving like you expect an ambush," he said. His voice was low, casual, but his eyes scanned the lot the way mine did, measuring exits. "Watching shadows." I didn't smile. "What are you doing here, Rourke?" He straightened, his expression tightening. "Protecting you." My laugh was dry, humorless. "From a high school board meeting?" He shook his head. "Don't play dumb. You know damn well this isn't about some spoiled kid. Someone leaked your file, Carter. Redacted or not, they wanted your past public. And if your past is public, then everything else is on the table." I finished for him, throat tightening. He nodded once. For a moment, silence stretched between us, heavy with years of unspoken history. Then his tone dropped lower, almost a whisper. "They haven't stopped looking for you." The words froze me. My fingers tightened on the strap of my bag. "Who?" Rourke's jaw clenched. "You know who. The ones we left behind. The ones who swore they'd even the score. And now someone's feeding them breadcrumbs straight to your door. The photograph. The envelope. The words you left them to die." My pulse thudded hard in my ears. I stepped closer, keeping my voice controlled. "How much do they know?" "Enough to hurt you. Enough to hurt anyone near you." His eyes flicked back toward the school. "That kid, Brandon? He's nothing but a spark. But the fire, that's coming from somewhere else. I exhaled slowly, the weight of it pressing into my bones. I had wanted so badly to be just Ms. Carter, the quiet teacher. But you can't erase scars that deep. The battlefield always finds its way back. Then I need to know who's pulling the strings, I said. Rourke studied me for a long moment, then gave the faintest nod. I can help. But it means reopening doors you slammed shut a long time ago. You sure you're ready for that? The night air bit cold against my skin. I looked back at the school rows of darkened windows where children dreamed their small, safe dreams, unaware of the war creeping closer. Ready? No. But necessary? Always. I met his eyes. I was born ready. His expression didn't change, but I saw it, the flicker of recognition. The soldier in me wasn't gone. She had just been sleeping. And now she was awake. They called it a prank, kids being kids. They called it karma, Brandon getting what he deserved. They called it justice when, in truth, it was a setup. I found out the hard way. The morning started ordinary enough. Stale coffee, bus rumble in the distance, the same stack of attendance sheets. But Rourke had been up all night, messages, contacts, an informal web of favors and old debts humming back to life. He'd driven me to school and lingered in the shadows of the faculty parking lot like a grey-suited guardian angel. His presence kept my nerves taut but steady. At 10:45, the intercom crackled with Principal Harris's voice asking faculty to the office. A lockdown drill, they said, a safety procedure. Someone had called in a tip about a suspicious vehicle parked near campus. We moved like teachers do, calm, practiced, voice low so we wouldn't alarm the students. Brandon was nowhere to be seen in first period. A text from a student said he had excused himself with a pass, going to the shop for supplies, BRB. No one questioned it. The kid had walked out before for hours at a time and come back like nothing had happened. Entitled kids do what they want. It was the same student, the one who'd filmed my cafeteria takedown, who found me in the corridor and handed me his phone. His face was pale. The video was live. Brandon, outside the rear gate, leaning against the chain-link fence, laughing with three older men I did not recognize. One of them moved like a predator with a limp, another kept glancing over his shoulder, scanning. They weren't local. They carried the sorts of smiles men put on when they had money or power or both. He was bait. My stomach turned cold. Rourke was on my shoulder before I could decide how to move. Don't, he hissed. We move now. We didn't ask permission. We went through the service door by the gym, skirts tucked, badges flashing, teachers on duty, no cause for alarm, and then out the back where the alley scent of trash and wet leaves met the dull throb of the highway. The vehicle was there, an unmarked van, black as a bruised sky. The men in the video were real, smoking like they owned the air itself, and Brandon, God, Brandon, was smiling the stupid, careless smile of a kid who still thought he could swagger out of anything. Brandon. My voice snapped his head up. The men stiffened at once. One of them, tall, lean, bearing a tattoo that crawled up his neck like a vine, moved toward Brandon with a casual menace. You lost, kid? He asked. Rourke slid between us. He didn't look like a teacher meddling. He looked like a blockade. Back off, Rourke said crisply. You're on school property. The tattooed man laughed. School property don't mean jack on a quiet Tuesday, old man. He took a step closer, and something about the way his hand twitched told me this wasn't about a fight, it was a message. I kept my voice steady, low. Leave him alone. Walk away. They looked at me then, with that particular kind of appraisal that sizes a target. You the one who broke his arm? The man asked. The question carried nothing of student discipline. It carried the scent of a threat calibrated by someone who'd read the gossip feed. Rourke's jaw flexed. We don't want trouble. Trouble, for them, was currency. One of the men knocked over a bucket near the fence. It clattered loud in the narrow back alley. Brandon flinched like a cornered animal. The tattooed man advanced another step. The tallest one, broad-shouldered, face like an old bruise, reached toward Brandon, and in that half-second his hand closed on the boy's wrist. Rourke moved. Fast. Too fast for anyone without training. He lifted his hand, not to hit, but to block. The tattooed man's arm arced. There was a sharp crack like a twig. Brandon yelped and stumbled back, then something I had hoped to never use in a schoolyard whispered awake in my limbs. I remembered the feel of breaking bone under palm, how silence falls after a precise strike. The memory slid into action, a step, a shift of weight, my hand where it needed to be to redirect force. I didn't want to hurt him, no, not to break him. I wanted to remove the threat. The tall man lunged toward Rourke, and I twisted, sweeping my leg low in a move that scraped against the language of self-defense classes and read instead like a battlefield maneuver. He hit the pavement hard, cursing, surprised in a way only men who are used to getting away with things ever are. That's when the gun came into view. It was small, black, pressed under the broad man's jacket like an afterthought until he lifted it, pointing it in the direction of Rourke and me. The world narrowed. A bird in a far tree kept singing. Don't, the shooter said. Calm. Businesslike. Suddenly the alley felt too tight to breathe in. Rourke froze. Brandon's face went grey. The three men laughed. It was the sound of people who had rehearsed this. But they hadn't rehearsed me. I moved like a shadow folding. 3 seconds, a pivot, a disarm I had executed 100 times in training drills where a bumbling mannequin was the only casualty. My hand caught the handset's barrel with a pressure that didn't crush bone but sufficient to seize control. The gun bucked. The shooter's fingers tightened around my wrist. Pain flared a precise, sharp ache, but I had leverage. I twisted, rolling through the arc of the man's center of gravity. The gun clattered, slammed against the pavement, skittered into darkness. The alley erupted into noise. A shout, a grunt, the frantic ring of a phone recording. In that chaotic second, the tattooed man reached for me, too slow. Rourke's elbow found his ribs. Brandon scrambled away, clutching his arm like a man who'd discovered what consequences felt like. We were out of there before more sirens could answer the noise. My car, Rourke's truck, wheels throwing up wet gravel. Hands gripped the wheel, breath fogged the glass, and inside we sat like people smoking out of a shared trauma. Rourke's hand found mine and squeezed once. You okay? He asked. I'm fine, I lied. My palms were shaking, a tremor I didn't like to feel. The video of the alley fight hit my feed an hour later. It was grainy, taken from a distance, voices loud enough to make out shouts. The headline called it a teacher-involved scuffle and spun it into questions about vigilantism and escalation. The comments were predictably vicious. But the men in the van were more telling. The tattoo on the tall man's neck, something like a skull wrapped in chains, was distinct. A quick check through the old contacts Rourke had revived gave us a whisper of context. These men were linked to a private security outfit that had done dirty jobs for private interests overseas. Men who could be hired to intimidate, to send messages, to tie threads back to a place someone had wanted buried. And here's the cruelest edge. Someone had wanted me riled up. Baited. Forced into a public act, something that would feed the narrative the Walkers wanted to sell. Miss Carter, violent veteran, liability. Brandon, who'd been a problem, became the mechanism to drag me into a corner where I'd either be punished legally or exposed in a way that would end me. There are moments you realize who you truly are. In that wet alley, as rain pricked the back of my neck and the city hummed indifferent beyond our small violence, I realized I wasn't only a teacher or a veteran. I was a target. And targets, I'd been taught, either disappear quietly or fight back so hard the hunters regret ever picking them. Rourke's eyes were on me, hard and unreadable. "They'll escalate," he said. "We bought time, not safety." "Then we stop the next move before it ever starts," I replied. My voice was steady now. The tremor in my palms cooled into calculation. "Find out who hired them. Cut the line." He nodded. "And if it's deeper than the Walker money, then we burn the network to ash." I felt the words slide out of me with the ease of a woman who has given the order and had it followed. There was no bravado, only the cold arithmetic of survival. By evening, the town had a new headline: "Teacher, veteran, involved in brawl outside school." The comments poured. The Walkers smiled for the cameras, offering brief, wounded statements about their son's safety. No one asked whether the men who had tried to threaten a child might have been paid to do it. They never do. I sat at my kitchen table that night and scaled the risk like a map. Someone wanted me ended in reputation, and if reputation wasn't enough, there were harsher roads to take. Names to dig, wallets to open, old alliances to call in. Rourke could do some of it, but not everything. Some doors only opened with a name I'd never release. I burned the footage onto a secure drive, labeled it in a way only I could read, and slid it into the back of a drawer behind a stack of lab reports. The teacher part of me wanted to go back to normal lessons, to safe experiment kits and lab rules. The veteran in me was already drafting contingencies. The question that would not leave me was not could I fight, they knew I could. It was how far would they go to make sure I couldn't. Outside, the night settled, not with peace, but with the slow ticking of a clock that counts down to a war that would not stay hidden. They say smoke always leads back to fire. I found myself hunched over a laptop in the small hours, following the smell like a bloodhound, because once you know you're being hunted, ignorance is a luxury you can't afford. Rourke had done the heavy lifting: calls to old contacts, blurred alleyways of whispers, a list of names that smelled like trouble. He'd tracked the van to a private security contractor, one of those grey market outfits that slipped between legality and something uglier. Their bills were clean, but the money that paid them came through a thin, anonymous wire. Thin wires have a way of leading to fat men who hide behind paperwork. "You want me to do this carefully," Rourke had said when he handed me a printout. "We don't expose ourselves until we can pin one name to the deed. Bolt cut one anchor, you don't bring down the whole damn ship. You sink it." I nodded and dove in. The days blurred. I taught during the hours I had to labs, lectures, grading papers with one hand while my other scrolled through emails. Parents still petitioned, the board still dragged its heels. The Walkers played victim on camera, their lawyer the balm smoothing every angry question into a reheated grievance. Brandon kept a low profile, his biography rewritten in the town's newsfeed, fragile son, humbled by incident. He looked hollowed out when I caught him in the hallway, eyes avoiding mine, as if the alley had aged him 10 years. But the trail was moving. Small threads of money, 50, 100,000, hopped between shell accounts like frogs. At the far end, a corporation name surfaced: Walker Investments. The same name that decorated the stadium where Brandon played, the same name on a plaque in the school gym. A corporate email address carrying a payment authorization to the security contractor had been filed under a lawyer's name. A lawyer who also represented the Walkers. It felt like a match set to burn. Rourke didn't flinch at the evidence. "This is what we needed," he said. "You want to go public with it, you do it right. You don't go to the press with a hunch, especially not with a town full of lynch mobs waiting for a reason to scream." But there was more to it than making a deposit trail. I needed leverage, something the Walkers couldn't buy with lawyers and smear campaigns. And there was one place few people in town would think to look: the closed case files from my unit, a tight-lipped ledger of operations that Rourke still had one locked copy of. Names, places, favors. Not public. Not supposed to be touched. I'd kept my distance from that past for a reason. People died so those pages didn't have to be reopened. But the men who'd tried to bait Brandon and the ones who'd sent me that photograph, someone wanted me cornered. They'd used my past as an arrow. I could use it as a mirror. We laid the plan. Rourke would quietly leak the financial thread to a trustworthy investigative reporter. He owed a favor to a person who wouldn't sully the evidence with opinion. I would stand by, a reluctant figure only, ready to corroborate if pushed. We'd expose the link between Walker Investments and the security contractor. Make the town see the money trail and, by extension, the motive. And if the Walkers retaliated, we'd have evidence, names, and an ally who could be bought. We moved fast. The reporter, an old contact of Rourke's named Marla, met me at a diner with cold coffee and warmer eyes. She carried no camera, only a recorder and a manner that said she'd seen men like the Walkers and chewed them up on her morning column. She promised discretion. I signed a non-disclosure with the kind of calm I reserved for lab safety protocols and battlefield briefings. 2 days later, the thread pulled. An exposé went live, local powerhouse linked to aggressive tactics against teacher who defended herself. The headline was clean. The body of the piece walked through the paperwork, the wire transfers, the contractor invoices, and the subtle handoff that led from Walker Investments to men with tattoos and vans. It didn't scream guilt, it presented facts and let the court of public opinion draw its own blood. Town reaction was immediate. Some parents turned on the Walkers. School board members who had been content to sit on their hands called for an emergency inquiry. The Walkers' lawyer slammed the article as libel. They threatened suits, press conferences, denials that were too polished to be truthful. But for the first time since the lab, I felt the angle shift. For the first time, the people who had tried to bury me were seeing their world get tilted. And then the cost showed up. A week after the story, my mailbox held another envelope. No photograph this time, just a small, white card with neat, typed letters. Enough, it said, sitting center like a judge's order. No name. No return address. Sending the message was inefficient and intimate. Someone wanted to remind me that exposure worked both ways. They could tarnish a reputation, yes, but they could also make things more painful on a level that had nothing to do with evidence or headlines. Rourke's jaw tightened when I showed him the card. "They're accelerating," he said. "They don't like losing control." I knew what that meant. The exposes would come, the public would frenzy, and then the people who pull strings would reach for uglier tools, intimidation at home, threats to friends, more than just viral videos. The war would translate from paper to people. That evening, the school called me into the office. The board had voted cautiously to suspend me pending the inquiry, half discipline, half PR. They couched it in neutral words about safety and process. In truth, it was a move to calm donors and keep lawsuits at bay. Rourke wanted to march into the meeting and tear the room down. I asked him to stay. We had to be strategic. I would not give them the satisfaction of an overreaction. On the car ride home, I felt exposed in a new way. Suspension meant my presence at the school was limited. I couldn't access certain files or protect certain students the way I had before. It felt like someone had taken a splint off a broken limb, sudden movement, jagged. The next morning, the town woke to word that Brandon Walker had been reported missing. At first I thought it was a sick, cruel rumor. Then the local PD sent out the bulletin. He hadn't come home the night before. His cell phone pinged in a distant grid. Video from a gas station camera showed a van similar to the one from the alley, same black paint, same chipped bumper, pulling away from a convenience store at 2 a.m. In the footage, a figure who could have been Brandon stumbled toward the van and was led inside. The headlines flipped like a coin. The Walkers vomited concern and demanded action. The town stitched itself into panic and prayer. And I read the reports and knew the truth with a cold certitude. The men who had tried to bait him had more than intimidation in mind now. Brandon had been baited into something much darker. I sat at my kitchen table, the phone in my hand, the white card fluttering beside my palm. Rourke's message pinged. They took the bait. Now they're fishing with hooks. My mouth tasted of copper. My past had been weaponized, my attempts to expose it had provoked a response, and the boy who'd once put his hands around my throat was now, possibly, in far more danger than I'd ever imagined. You don't choose the battles that chase you. You choose whether to run, and I had stopped running a long time ago. I stood, grabbed my jacket, and drove out into a town that had already begun to drown in the consequences of its own secrets. The sirens were starting to wail, and somewhere beyond the soft glow of houses, my life, teacher, veteran, fugitive of rumor, shifted into a different gear, one that would not end with a school board vote or a viral clip. It would end only when I decided it should. The news cycle screamed missing teen. The Walkers' press conference painted Brandon as an innocent boy targeted by a disturbed teacher with a violent past. My picture flashed across screens again, this time alongside the blurred footage of Brandon being shoved into that van. Every instinct in me boiled. Not because of what the Walkers said, lies were their oxygen, but because I knew Brandon's disappearance wasn't random. They wanted me cornered. The boy who once wrapped his hand around my throat was now a pawn in a war far bigger than his teenage cruelty. Rourke didn't waste time. We hit the streets that night, contacts, cameras, whispers from gas station attendants who saw nothing until Rourke leaned close enough for memory to sharpen. A pattern formed. The van had cut out toward the abandoned mills east of town. Old steel bones, broken windows, a labyrinth where law enforcement rarely set foot. This is a trap, Rourke warned. Good, I said. Let's spring it. The mill was a carcass of iron. Rust dripped down beams like dried blood. My boots whispered over gravel as Rourke and I slid through a broken side door. The air smelled of oil and damp, and somewhere inside came muffled voices. One too high-pitched, panicked. Brandon. I signaled, hand low, and we split. My eyes adjusted to shadows, reading the space the way I'd once read deserts at midnight. The voices sharpened. You don't understand, Brandon stammered. I don't know anything. She's just my teacher. A laugh answered, harsh, gravelly. She's not just anything, kid. And if she cares, she'll come running. If not, well, nobody's gonna miss a spoiled little rich boy. The men from the alley. 3 shadows, one armed. Brandon tied to a chair, eyes wide, bruises starting to form. I slid closer, heart steady. Every second we waited was a second his fear deepened. Rourke moved first, distraction. A bottle clattered across the concrete. The men spun, guns lifting. I was already there. The first went down with a strike to the throat, collapsing in a wheeze. The second swung wild. I ducked low, hooked his ankle, sent him crashing against a beam. The third, the shooter, had the drop for half a second before Rourke's arm locked around his wrist, wrenching the weapon sideways. The sound of metal on concrete echoed sharp. Brandon screamed, "Stop. Please." And then silence. The three men groaned in defeat. My breathing slowed. But the trap wasn't over. A slow clap rose from the shadows. The man who stepped forward was older, sharper, his suit out of place in the mill's decay. I recognized him instantly, Mr. Walker. Brandon's father. His smile was venom. "Well done, Ms. Carter. You never disappoint." Brandon's head jerked toward his father. "Dad." His voice broke. What are you doing here?" Mr. Walker didn't look at him. His eyes stayed on me. "You were supposed to break," he said. "Lose your temper, prove yourself unstable. But you just had to fight back, didn't you? Always the soldier." My jaw clenched. "You put your own son in danger," he sneered. "My son has been a liability since birth. Arrogant, sloppy, weak. Tonight, he was bait. And you came, right on schedule." Brandon's face drained of color. "Dad, you set me up." Walker finally looked at him, disdain dripping. "You're not worth the empire I've built. But you," his finger stabbed the air toward me, "you're dangerous. You could ruin everything. Better to bury you now." Rourke stepped closer, low and lethal. "You don't have the power you think you do." Walker's smile widened. "Power? I own this town. The police answer to me. The board bows to me. When they find you here with a gun, with broken men, with my son terrified, they'll see exactly what I told them, a violent veteran who snapped." It was almost perfect. Almost. Because Walker hadn't noticed Brandon's phone still live-streaming from his pocket, broadcasting every word to thousands of people on the same platform that had once humiliated me. Brandon's eyes darted to mine. He'd done it. Accident or rebellion, it didn't matter. The truth was already out. Walker saw my smile then and finally understood he'd lost. The sirens came minutes later. This time, not for me. The livestream had gone viral in real time. Parents, students, even the board had heard Walker confess to using his own son as bait, to hiring mercenaries, to trying to destroy me. The police arrived armed and wide-eyed, finding Mr. Walker red-faced and raging while the evidence looped on every kid's phone. His empire crumbled in a single night. Brandon was untied, shaking but alive. He couldn't look at his father as they cuffed him. Couldn't speak as his mother wailed in disbelief. But he did look at me. And in his eyes, for the first time, there wasn't arrogance. There was shame. Gratitude, even. "Why did you save me?" he whispered as the paramedics checked his bruises. I crouched so we were eye to eye. Because even bullies deserve the chance to change. What you do with it, that's on you. The board reinstated me quietly. No apologies, no fanfare, but the parents who once doubted now nodded in the halls, their voices softer when they said my name. Rourke left town soon after, disappearing back into shadows. But before he went, he told me, "You don't owe anyone normalcy. But if you can have it, take it. You earned it." Brandon transferred schools, away from his father's shadow. I heard whispers he was different, quieter, maybe wiser. Time would tell. And me. I returned to the lab, the chalk dust, the controlled chaos of students learning. But I carried no illusion anymore. I was a teacher, yes, but I was also a survivor, a soldier, a woman who had faced down power and refused to break. The town called it a scandal, then a miracle, then just another story. But I knew better. It was a war. And I had won.